All right, so we have folks who are starting to file in, the members of the public. So good evening, everybody. We are going to get started in just a minute. It's 5:59, and we'll get rolling from there. So welcome, and we'll get going in just a second. Thanks. All right, so we are at 6 o'clock, and I want to welcome everybody for our fourth and final elections forum for the City of Oxnard 2020 election. And we have tonight an introductory presentation from the City Clerk candidate who is running unopposed, and we'll get to her in just a second. And then that part of our program will be followed by our City Treasurer candidates, who we will be hearing from and going over some Q&A from questions that were submitted by the public. So my name is Gabriel Turan, and I am the first vice chair for the Inter-Neighborhood Council organization. And the INCO directed that we have these forums available to the public, and we recruited members of the public to volunteer to help put this together for everybody. And so let's real quickly do a quick introduction of our folks we'll be hearing from tonight. First, we'll be hearing from Ms. Rose Chaparro, who you can see here, and she is our city clerk candidate. We will also be hearing from Mr. James Aragon, who is running for city treasurer, and Mr. Phil Molina, who is also running for city treasurer for re-election. So to get started, we're going to start with Ms. Chaparro, who's going to introduce herself and talk a little bit about what she brings to the city of Oxnard. So Rose, I'll go ahead and let you take it.
Yes, thank you very much for having me tonight. Happy to be here with all of you. Again, yes, my name is Rose Chaparro, and I am a bilingual 38-year resident of the city of Oxnard. I have chosen to run for the position of city clerk because of my experience and expertise as a city clerk. In my professional career, I have over 25 years of experience serving local nonprofits and government agencies as a public servant. I currently serve as the Deputy City Clerk for the City of Santa Paula. I maintain public records, process records requests, oversee the City Council meetings, certify and record resolutions, and administer oaths of office. I would like to bring this direct experience to the office of the Oxnard City Clerk. Previously, I have worked for the Oxnard School District in a very almost identical position, with the exception of a different title. But in that position, I also did provide support for the Board of Trustee meetings, which of course in that position, I also served as a confidential executive assistant to the superintendent and the Board of Trustees. I performed assigned statutory duties and responsibilities for the city clerk position, coordinated and attended all of the Board of Trustees meetings, coordinated and participated, preparation, review, editing of agendas, minutes, and staff reports, ensured all compliance with legal requirements, managed the Board of Trustees agenda preparation and publication, and that was all in accordance with the Brown Act, informed department of established deadlines and agenda item submissions, took and prepared and posted Board of Trustee meeting minutes, supervised the record storage systems, coordinated, prioritized, supervised all the activities for the staff in the superintendent's office. I would also like to say that some of the goals that I currently have for the city clerk's department would be to continue to improve access to public records. Also to ensure that proper procedures are in place for records retention and continue improving on the access to public notifications for the public. And with that said, I'm just very excited, looking forward to my transition as your new city clerk, looking forward to serving you in that position for the city of Oxnard. Would any of you like to ask me any questions?
Yes, thank you very much, Ms. Chaparro. So at this point, she has offered to answer any questions. We have the Q&A function, as you can see at the bottom of the screen there, if you are live with us on Zoom. And at this point, we don't have any submitted, but I do have one quick question for you, Ms. Chaparro. You already mentioned, your experience as a current deputy clerk, as well as your work with this Oxnard School District with the Board of Trustees.
Yes,
And it sounds like you have quite a bit of experience with Public Records Act requests, correct?
correct.
And so, can you tell us a little bit about what those are and if there's, specific timelines involved, just for the public to hear about that? Because I think that's a really important part of your job or of the role that you are a candidate for,
Yes,
and just how important they are to the public.
of course, they're very important. We get in so many different types of public records requests. Some are related to our meetings, our agendas. We get public comment as well. But basically, my job is to respond to the public records requests that come into our office within 10 days. So I coordinate with the different departments within the city to obtain the information that I need to be able to respond to those public records requests. We really do try our very best every time to respond within those initial 10 days that are allowed. However, depending on the amount or the type of records that are being requested, the research that needs to be done, or the work that needs to be done by staff to acquire those records, from time to time we do ask for an extension, but we really do try to adhere to the 10 days. So the records, the requests come to me. Currently at the City of Santa Paula, we use a system on our website through the city's through the city clerk's page, where you submit your public record request. That comes directly to me. I go ahead and assign it to a department. If it's not, it doesn't have to do with the city clerk's office. If I need to retain records from another department, let's say Public Works, Community Development, I approach them. I ask them for what I need. They will provide those documents to me, and it's my job to put and assemble those records together, review them for accuracy, and then release them back to the person that requested them. At times, I also do get records requests for agendas or minutes that I have prepared for council meetings or committee meetings that that we have here in the city and that I support. So then that's my job to go ahead and put together those minutes, those agendas, any attachments, put that packet together, and then reply back to the individual, that requested the information. But yes, we get many, many different. Sometimes they're for HR, sometimes they're for the police department and confidential records. Sometimes we need to redact information. So it just depends on the type of request. But we get requests for many different types of information and for many different departments. And it's my job to coordinate those requests and respond back within those 10 days.
Great, thank you very much for that. So the Public Records Act requests, those are really great things that we are entitled to in where we live, and it's something that is really important, I think, to show transparency with our local and state government or any type of government, the ability of the people to review the things that the government has or documents that they're putting out or things that have happened in the past. So thank you for helping to keep that transparency as we as you transition in through your candidacy for city clerk. All right.
Absolutely. Yes, thank you very much.
Of
Thank you for
course.
your time.
So I don't see any other questions. So I think what we're going to do now is we'll go ahead at just about 6:10. We're going to go ahead and transition to the city treasurers. Thank you again, Ms. Chaparro.
Oh, thank you very much. It's been my pleasure. Thank you for the introduction. I greatly appreciate it, and I look forward to working with all of you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, so at this point, we are going to transition to our city treasurers here. And I'm going to do a really quick introduction on how this will work. And again, our candidates for city treasurer are Mr. James Aragon and Mr. Phil Molina. And I am just saying their names in alphabetical order by last name. And just so we know, tonight's forum with them, we have a number of questions that were submitted by the public, and we will also have that book ended by opening and closing statements. So what we're going to do first is we're going to have 3 minutes each of opening statements from each candidate. They will have up to 3 minutes to give that statement. That will be followed by questions and answers. During that questions and answers portion, we will go back and forth between Mr. Aragon and Mr. Molina, where the same question will be posed to both of them, and each of them will have 1.5 minutes to respond to that question. After we go through the question and answers portion, there will be 3 minutes each for closing statements for both of our candidates, in which case they will have 3 minutes to say, to give a closing statement on what they would like the public to remember at the end of our programming. Asking our questions this evening will be Mr. David Ebbett, who is from the Fremont North neighborhood and is a member of the INCO and a volunteer to plan these events. And then I will be asking some of the questions as well and keeping time. We will have another person who will be joining us to take over the questions, and her name is Miss Alejandra Valencia. She is completing her actual work because she is a volunteer, and so her job has her just staying a few more minutes, and then she will be joining us as well. So what I want to go ahead and do now is Mr. Molina and Mr. Aragon, I will be keeping time. There is an account here that has the timer where you can see it, but I will be giving you warnings when you have 30 seconds remaining, okay? So again, we're starting in alphabetical order for this opening statements portion, and we'll start with Mr. Aragon. And Mr. Aragon, you have 3 minutes.
All right, thank you. I'm glad I never changed my name to Xanadu. Get to go first. My name is James Aragon, as Gabe said, and I'm born and raised in Ventura County. Well, half my childhood in Ventura County. I was born in Ventura, spent half my life up in Northern California, but I consider Oxnard home because I graduated class of '93 from Oxnard High. And that was in '93, yes. So then I joined the Air Force. I was in the Air Force for 20 years. I retired in 2013 and ended up landing in Atlanta. But slowly but surely, over about 4-year period of time, I made it back to Oxnard. I work from home for a bank, so I'm fortunate to be able to do that. And anyhow, that's why I'm back in Oxnard. I've always been somebody who's, I remember watching city council debates when I was in high school for Oxnard City Council. And so I've always had an interest in politics and in city governance. And I was approached to run for the seat of city treasurer. Persons who asked me to run know my background. I have a background in compliance auditing, risk assessment, and just overall auditing. I am pursuing a CPA, a certified a public accountant certification. I have a bachelor's in accounting. I have an MBA, master's in business administration, and I really like to solve problems. And so I really I like the idea of maybe helping the city out, and so I agreed to run, and this is why I'm here. So that's it.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Molina, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm Phillip Molina, and thank you for having me. For a little background, I was born in France. At age 13, I started picking tomatoes in Tulare County for 25 cents an hour. Then later on in high school, I was selected to represent the high school at the California Boys State in 1964. I earned a full scholarship to university in 1965. Graduated with a BA in pre-law and political science in May of 1969, where I earned a scholarship to LSU Law School. I got married on June the 14th, 1969 to Linda, which was the best thing I ever did in my life. Then, surprise, surprise, I got drafted in the U.S. Army in August 1969. I served at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, Fort Sill, Oklahoma, Fort Belvoir, Virginia, and Fort Carson, Colorado, and received an honorable discharge in 1973. I graduated from Combat Engineers Officer School in 1970-1971. During my 4 years, I've been able to stop payments on long expired contracts. I prevented payments that were lacking budgetary authority. I investigated the unauthorized use of overtime. I blocked duplicate payments to vendors. I fought against cronyism and sweetheart deals, and some you've read in the newspaper, which were not something that I brought forward. I recovered unauthorized loans, closely monitored cash receipts. I successfully lobbied for an independent auditor and a whistleblower. I've earned Oxnard the highest investment policy award that the state gives. Out of 472 cities, we got the highest. And I should probably tell you that I am a CPA, retired now. I have a master's in business administration, and I have prior experience working as the Oxnard finance director, and we can go into that when you have hours of time to talk about it. But I've been a city finance director for over 25 years with cities in California, which is why I'm very familiar with the California government codes as it relates to the Treasury and the Finance Department. Thank you very much, and I'll end it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So at this point, we are going to now transition into the Q&A portion. And as I had mentioned, we will have 1.5 minutes per response to each question. And Mr. Dave Ebbett, you can go ahead and take the first question, and then I'll go after that. And we will start this time with Mr. Molina, followed by Mr. Aragon.
Candidates, good evening. Question is, what are your financial qualifications, education, professional expertise, and credentials you bring to serve to this office?
Well, thank you very much for that question. I think I started speaking about it earlier. I have a certified public accountant license with the state of Illinois, retired. I'm a member of the California CPA Society, a member of the Illinois CPA Society, a member of the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants. I do have a master's in business administration from a California university. I've been an insurance auditor for the state. I've audited, and in that process, I've found people who embezzled money from their insurance company, the executive manager. In my capacity as a finance director, I've been able to turn the cities around. When I came to Oxnard, I was told it's bankrupt. I was able to turn that around with the help of a local CPA who worked for the city. And we were able to find a resolution to that to keep the city of Oxnard from
30 seconds.
I think that's pretty well it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Aragon?
Question. All right. Yeah, Mr. Molina is very qualified. He's been doing this a lot longer than I have. My background really isn't in finance management. I am obviously 20 years in the military, and they don't tell you anything about certifications. So I kind of learned that when I got out and decided not to go the government contractor route. I was an intelligence analyst, and it was very lucrative to go that route, but I decided I didn't want to play that game anymore. So I got into banking. I am a risk compliance and audit professional in the banking industry. I do compliance auditing, and my background is on internal controls, analyzing internal controls, finding issues where systems don't find issues. And I've audited everything from small mom and pop attorney firms to billion-dollar publicly traded companies.
30 seconds.
I have a master's in business administration, and I did recently I had a different bachelor's degree previously. I do have a BA in accounting now. I just got from Cal Lutheran so that I could get my CPA certification. I take the first test in November. Hopefully I'll be done by spring. And so my background, really my strength is in analysis and finding problems and figuring out how to fix them for the future. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Oh, excuse me.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much. And we had Ms. Alejandra Valencia join us now, and so she will take question number 2.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Why do you want to be treasurer of the city?
And we will start with Mr. Aragon, followed by Mr. Molina.
You know, if the city was running smoothly and city government was popular, I probably would not be running, because I've always been somebody who goes in as a fixer. If I've ever had a position in the military or in my current role in banking, I've never really satisfied if things are operating smoothly. I'm not a day-to-day operator. I'm a fixer. I love to fix issues, and the city has a lot of issues. One of those issues being transparency, and making things understandable, because they can put all the budget items on the website, but that doesn't mean anything to anybody if they don't have a background in analyzing that type of information. And then, of course, when you start pulling back the details and understanding, what's happening, and I've got things, there's all kinds of examples I've talked in the last couple of months in city council meetings, and I'll be talking about next week, of where things aren't as they should be.
30
as far as
seconds.
full transparency, so people can understand the full picture. The city wants to make people believe that they can do everything, but they just don't have enough money, and there's no prioritization. So I just want to be somebody who comes in and works with everybody to fix it and to make sure that the residents have the full picture, and understand what's really going on in the city. Sometimes you have bad news, but you just need to be blunt with the bad news, but then you also need to say what's wrong. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Molina?
Yes, thank you very much. James obviously is a well-qualified, well-educated, well-experienced individual. And I'm glad he's running for this position, because if there's someone that I would want to lose to, it would be someone like James, who comes to this with the same attitude and education and experience similar to mine. The difference might be that I have a few more years. I do agree with James. The problem I've had in stopping payments, in preventing payments that exceed the budget, and investigating unauthorized use of overtime, and all these other things that I was able to accomplish in the first year and a half, have been stopped because the current city management didn't like that. And so they stripped me of all those duties. So again, I too recommend, please vote in favor of Measure L. Put back into the city treasurer's duties those that are assigned by the state of California and referred to as statutory
30
duties,
seconds.
plus the ability to set metrics for the various departments. Both James and I would need that to do our job, to support the public demand to have open and transparent government. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question will be Mr. Ebbett, and Mr. Molina will go first, followed by Mr. Aragon.
Candidates, what is the biggest fiduciary challenge to the city, and how will you make it better?
Well, something that we've been looking at are the city's investments, and the only duty that remains currently with the city treasurer is the investments. We have in excess of $250 million in our potential investment portfolio, and I've checked with various investment brokers and professional agencies on the fiduciary responsibility that the city treasurer holds for investing $250 million. How do we protect ourselves from the treasurer sending that money to Uruguay or Panama and leaving on the night's airplane and going there? That's part of the fiduciary duties of the city treasurer, to secure that money. And to that end, all the companies, I called about 4 of them, and they all said that fiduciary duties would require the city to pay no less than $500,000 to $800,000 a year for the insurance that they would require to get. So I think when we look at fiduciary duties, that's certainly one of the bigger ones, is the handling of cash.
30 seconds.
So I think we need to keep that in mind when we're deciding who to vote for. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Aragon?
Mr. Molina really hit it on the head there, and that is, when you have a fiduciary duty, you need to have a division of responsibilities. And so the city council decides ultimately how to spend money, and the city manager and the city staff spend the money on the priorities the city council establishes. What the city treasurer should be doing is making sure that that's all out in the open and without loss of integrity. And it doesn't matter if you have the highest integrity persons on staff or in the city manager's role, but that is what fiduciary duty is a check and balance. And so I think establishing those sort of trust within the city government and then between the government and the city is really important to do. I think I actually follow a theory of economics called Austrian economics. It's not very mainstream.
30 seconds.
But let's just say that using that sort of analysis, I pulled all my money out of investments in late 2007. I probably could have held on to them for another 6 months and still may have been outright, but I missed the crash. All that cash I took out from the crash, profited later on. And so we are in a straits. The U.S. government and therefore Oxnard City is in straits when it comes to revenue, and we need to be responsible. And hopefully, with Measure L passing, we can get that sort of responsibility and clarity.
Your time has expired, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you very much. Our next question will be Ms. Valencia, and Mr. Aragon will go first, followed by Mr. Molina.
Sorry about that. Question number 4. Considering the potential depth of this recession, what can you bring to the city that will be impactful?
Me to chime right first.
Yes.
Yeah. So the depth of reception, I love that. I love that term because, a lot of what's going on right now is assuming the best case scenario. This Measure E passing, the city expects to get $40 million a year out of that Measure E tax. That's assuming a recovery. I spoke at the last city council meeting, the special council meeting last week, and talked about how recessions are predictable. They happen all the time. It's called the business cycle. There's booms and there's busts. And if a city is always spending all its money, then it cannot have money for crises and downturns. And so I think this recession is not going to have a recovery in 2021 at all. And I think it might go for 2 or 3 more years.
Seconds.
So what the city treasurer can do is let the residents know the reality of the situation, and that residents need to insist that their city council prioritize, and the residents need to prioritize. What is our priorities? If we make $100 million a year, do we spend $100 million a year, or should we be spending 90 so we can have a nest egg, right? So I think everybody needs to be responsible. The city treasurer can lead that charge.
Your time has expired, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Molina?
Would you repeat the question, please?
Of course. Considering the potential depth of this recession, what can you bring to the city that will be impactful?
Can I just copy what James just said? Obviously we're from the same background, so we have the same sense. What you need to do, you need to understand the amount of revenue that's coming into the city. And you don't build a budget based upon dreams of the future. You build a budget based upon what you have today. And when you're looking at having 20 full-time police officers budgeted to the neighborhood of about $4 million that you're not going to fill for 2 years, that doesn't give people an understanding of how much money is available to use in other areas like streets and roads and curbs and whatever. The other thing that we would want to do is to look at all of the 176 funds the city has, and we want to identify which one of those funds are really there as required by law, either federal or state or city, and those that are not, and we want to bring them back into the general fund. so that we can once again give council the opportunity to know what the true numbers are. I cannot
30
agree,
seconds.
I cannot agree more with James. One of the things we have to do is prepare actual financial statements on a monthly basis and not just a conglomeration of data thrown out on a computer and telling people, there you are, it's transparent, because people aren't used to looking at tons and tons of data. They need it identified in a simple to understand financial statement presentation. Thank you.
Thank you both very much. Next question will be Mr. Ebbett, and Mr. Molina go first, followed by Mr. Aragon.
And candidates, question is to please explain your plan to improve the relationship between the treasurer position and the city leaders.
Well, I didn't know we had a problem. Is that what you're saying? Improve the problem?
It says to improve the relationship between the two.
Well, I think I'd like to start again every week. I was supposed to be meeting with the city manager, but when I've tried to do that over the last 7 months, I've been told, no, he's too busy, he can't meet with you. So that, of course, stops the ability to communicate with the city manager. I've continually offered city council members individually, of course, to come and see me, talk to me if they have any issues or problems. I've presented monthly not financial reports, but investment reports. And because the council doesn't want to get them on a monthly basis, we present them on the agenda on a quarterly basis. What is surprising to me is that I've shown in one of my reports that the city could possibly lose $296,000 if we had to sell our investments today. I expected the council to say what's going on, what's happening. I want to
30 seconds.
understand. And instead, the only question I got from the council is, why are your numbers on the screen so small? They wanted me to increase the size of the font. What we need to do, we need to educate the council. And it's not that they're dumb, it's that they haven't been educated properly. They've been dumbed down by all these graphs of pictures of people going up and down ladders. Instead, we have to teach them what a simple, straightforward financial report looks like so they can understand what they're looking at.
Perfect. And Mr. Aragon, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, relationship, I obviously walked into this reading through the newspapers and understanding the tension between Mr. Molina and the city manager, eventually city council. And of course, sometimes personalities just don't click. But you always just need professional. And so what I'm curious about, and which I've tried to get some answers from city council, city manager's office, just by sending some, just trying to engage with them myself, is trying to figure out what do they want a relationship. And so you have to have a city manager and a city council who wants to leverage the expertise that the city treasurer will bring. Mr. Molina has a certain expertise that he can bring. I have a certain expertise that I can bring. And I really believe Measure L needs to pass. But if it doesn't pass, 30 seconds, I got it.
30 seconds.
I just realized there's a clock right there. Is that if I have expertise, and if Measure L does not pass, the position's still there, and they should be leveraging it. I would like to help the city become super efficient, have super strong controls, and make good financial decisions, make on good financial planning. But they need to engage in that. And so I think me and Ms. Molina will both be available if they want it.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Next.
Thank you very much. Ms. Valencia, you have the next question, and we will have Mr. Aragon go first, followed by Mr. Molina.
Thank you, Gabe. So question number 6 for Mr. Aragon. Do you support Measure L?
Yes. I'll give you a why. Because I've got a minute and a half more to go. Yeah, I do support Measure L, and it's actually a well-written document. The reason I support, first of all, there's one piece in here that's really excited me, and that's talking about performance measurements. And really, that's about internal controls, about whether you're spending the money in an efficient and operational manner and how it's supposed to be intended. And I've got examples of that. I've looked at an analyst. Currently, I'm a contract analyst for a bank, and I've looked at 2 contracts that the city has with an attorney firm, and another one with the Ventura County, and they're poorly written. They don't have good controls in them, and there's basically big gaps on how money can be being spent very inefficiently. And those are the type of things I would like to bring to the table. Measure L allows that and makes the city treasurer responsible. And again,
30 seconds.
Thank you. You beat me to it. Again, you have a city council who decides the priorities of the city, and they decide how money is spent. And then you have a city manager and staff who decides or who spends that money to achieve the objectives. But the city manager currently is in a position where he also decides if he's doing a good job or not. And then waiting a year or 2 years for an outside auditor to tell you no is too late.
Just in time, Mr. Aragon. So, Mr. Molina, do you support Measure L?
Yes, I do. I don't think it surprises anyone. And for many of the reasons James already mentioned, when you look at the California government codes, the statutory duties of the city treasurer include safekeeping all money, complying with the laws governing deposits and the securing of public funds, paying out money only on warrants that are signed by legally designated persons. At least once a month, they're supposed to have a financial report showing all receipts, disbursements, and fund balance, and to be responsible for the duties of collecting taxes and license fees. Measure L would restore those statutory duties to the city treasurer, as is required by general law for Oxnard. And not to overemphasize the point, but if you have the same person who's deciding whether or not to spend money and how to spend it and where to spend the money, and he's the same person that's determining whether or not that's a good expenditure
30
of
seconds.
money, you're letting, as someone once said, the fox guard the hen house. And by my auditing insurance companies and finding that the CEO had embezzled money, he was not a happy camper. He went all the way to the governor to try to get it stopped. The fact that I had the details to show that he had embezzled was very strong, and not suggesting that anyone in Oxnard is doing anything intentional. But we need to have independent eyes looking at what's happening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Molina.
Okay, so the next set of questions that we have here pertain to a scenario if Measure L passes and the city treasurer is combined with the city finance director or city CFO position. These next few questions pertain to that scenario, okay? And Mr. Ebbett, you will take the next question.
Candidates, what formal management and supervisory experience do you have that would help qualify you for the oversight of a full-service municipal financial department with approximately 58 employees?
And Mr. Molina will go first.
Oh, okay. You have to understand, I think, what the financial functions of the finance department include. And I was looking at them earlier to remind me and bring myself current. They include forecasting of cash inflows and outflows. They include raising funds. It includes allocating funds properly, effectively using those funds consistent with the way the city has authorized it, to have financial control, internal control over how the budget is followed and complied with. And in order to do that, you want to look at all of your areas in the finance department. You'll have your accounts payable, your accounts receivable, you'll have your financial reporting, you'll have your budgeting. You want to make sure that they all work together and understand what's happening. The first thing I would do, quite frankly, is I would look at the taxonomy of the chart of accounts, which simply means that our current chart of accounts has not been built in a manner that's consistent with government accounting standards, but is more consistent.
30 seconds.
More consistent with financial government accounting standards. And I would reestablish the government accounting standards chart of accounts, and I would make the financial reports reflect that, so you show budget against actual, percentages that have been spent compared to actual, and the percentage of the projects that have been completed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Molina. Mr. Aragon?
Before we continue, Mr. Molina, the question was, what is your supervisory experience to oversee the full service municipal finance department with 58 employees? Can I give you 15 more seconds to answer that specific portion?
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Yeah, I've been a finance director in the city of 1, 2, 3 different cities before Oxnard. I was also the chief finance officer for the Department of Children and Family Services with LA County. I was head of the auditing division with the State Department of Insurance, where we had, I think, 42 insurance auditors. So those are some of my experience, boots on the ground, so to speak, in managing and supervising the staff of that size. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Aragon, go ahead.
I asked you to reread it. I was like, I don't think that was the answer. Read everything that Mr. Molina said in the first part A of his answer. Part B, as far as what is my supervisory experience. So 20 years in the military, I worked the way up. I ended up becoming a senior non-commissioned officer. I had many different jobs with many people under my charge. The largest direct group I've ever supervised was about 40 persons. All of them actually thing that I could not do. And it was a very specialized process and intelligence that they could do. But I was the manager. And so one of the things that you learn to do is understanding, managing a process is differently than doing individual tasks in the process. And so what I'm been very good at is understanding who my lever points are, understanding who my experts are, relying on them when needed, and providing strategic oversight of operations. 30 seconds now. My last role in the military, I've been an independent contributor with the banking industry. I'm not supervising anybody in the banking industry. But I'm my last job in the military, I was overseeing compliance for a 500-man unit that included civil engineering, security forces, telecommunications, intelligence, contracting, finance, and many other specialties. I didn't know all the specialties, but I was very good at managing compliance.
Mr. Aragon, thank you. Gabe?
Thank you very much. Our next question will be handled by Ms. Valencia. It'll be Mr. Aragon, followed by Mr. Molina.
Thanks, Gabe. Question number 8. Instead of the city manager, the new treasurer CFO position will be in charge of preparing and proposing the city's annual budget of proposing the city's annual budget of $500 million. What is your formal experience in preparing and overseeing budgets and organizations of this size?
I'm first on that one. I do not have experience managing $500 million. The biggest budget I've managed was probably about $8 million in training and compliance in my last role in the military. But I have audited large sums of money. I talked about auditing billion-dollar publicly traded companies, not from a public accounting perspective, but from a financial compliance perspective. And that is looking at receivables, looking at payables, and more importantly, payables to the bank, and making sure that there wasn't any tomfoolery, which I found actually. I found an attorney firm in New Jersey keeping 2 sets of books. I found an agency that was running a float, turned out to be about $10 million. And that is something that agency actually had a public accountant certify 30 seconds. That agency that was basically running a float with the bank's money had financial statements that were audited. But there's general financial accounting, and then there's investigative analysis, and that's where my expertise comes in. I have not managed a $500 million budget, but managing a budget, it's just numbers and it's accounts. So whether it's a home budget or a bigger budget, you just need to know the inputs and outputs.
Thank you, Mr. Aragon. Mr. Molina?
Yes, when I was with the LA County. I think their budget was $1.7 billion. We put that together. The difference being it is more restricted to the department budget, and so you don't get a full breadth of the different types of departments that we're talking about here in Oxnard. But again, in all the cities I worked at before Oxnard, they were full service cities. We put together budgets which included airports, water, sewer, solid waste, and the general fund, police, fire, and whatnot. So I'm familiar with the structure and the makeup and the process of looking at the details and bringing it from the details to the summary to the position of presenting a financial budget that is understandable and that you can drill down to anytime you want to look at how did you come up with that $500,000 number, you would be able to actually look at it.
30 seconds.
I worked I've actually put the budget together myself in some cities where the city manager didn't want to get involved. But in all the other cities, I was always working with the city manager in putting together the budget so that we could get a budget that helped the city accomplish what the council wanted. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Mr. Molina.
Thank you. And before we move on, Mr. Molina, Mr. Aragon had mentioned the largest budget he directly oversaw was $8 million. What was the largest budget you directly oversaw, sir?
I think it was $1.7 billion at the county, but I'd have to look at that. That was years ago.
Okay, and you directly oversaw that.
I managed the portion that related to that department, and yeah, that department was in that range, yeah.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ebbett, you will take the next question. Mr. Molina will go first, followed by Mr. Aragon.
Candidates, Measure L states that the Treasurer CFO shall design, implement, and oversee a system of internal controls to safeguard assets, ensure financial statement reliability, promote operational efficiency, and encourage compliance with the applicable laws and City Council directives. What would your plan be to meet this duty imposed by the initiative and approved by the voters?
I was listening to the city's finance department presentation on internal controls, and they were consistent with the two different studies, the Treadway study and the I forget the name of the other one, in terms of what's required to do a proper review of internal control. I think the most important thing in my mind to accomplish that is to make sure that the people who are responsible for reviewing and analyzing the internal controls are independent of those that they're reviewing. You want to be able to have someone who is not afraid of retaliation when they identify that there's a problem. You want to have open communication between that group of people who are doing the internal control review and the finance committee of the council. It is the council's finance committee and not the city manager that needs to be hiring the internal auditors for
30 seconds.
internal control. Nothing can be more important than having that independence again. And James mentioned it earlier. We've both been in situations where we find that that there's misdoings. When you do, people don't like that. It's not something they enjoy. And if you were working for them, guess what? You wouldn't be working for them very much longer. So we need to make sure that we have that ability to secure the jobs of the people who are doing the job. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Aragon?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
I sure can. Measure L states that the Treasurer CFO shall design, implement, and oversee a system of internal controls to safeguard assets, ensure financial statement reliability, promote operational efficiency, and encourage compliance with applicable laws and City Council directives. What would your plan be to meet this duty imposed by the initiative and approved by the voters?
Thank you. I apologize. I got lost in Mr. Molina's answer, and I'm like, wait, what was the question? So it's a great question. I actually spoke at that internal controls presentation, and I think they've got the easy part done, which is building the goals and objectives and a overarching structure. Hard part is implementing that and actually developing real controls. And even if they get to that part, I actually went as far at my talk at that presentation to suggest that if Measure L doesn't pass and the city just doesn't want to give the authority to the city treasurer, then they should at least hire an independent an internal control person directly to the city council who doesn't answer for the city manager, because that independence is super important. And a city manager mentioned that, well, we have an internal auditor. We spend a bunch of money to have them come and find a bunch of the issues. It's too late. I mean, it's a year's gone by. You have a year of broken processes, and you could have. It's so exciting, the idea of all the controls you could build in the city. I mean, there's tons of them that in the 2 months that I've been involved in city council meetings, day to day, and reading and all that. There's so much opportunity, and it's really exciting, the idea of building these and building a real professional force. And I think everybody will really enjoy it because people want to do a great job. And so I think that's what I bring, is just the excitement and to do the job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the next question will be Ms. Valencia.
Okay, next question.
We're on question. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. We're on question 11, right?
10.
Sorry about that. Measure L also requires that for each department, the treasurer/CFO shall establish performance measurements pertaining to the department's core functions with no fewer than one performance measurement based on cost, one based on quality, and one based on timelines. What formal training and experience do you possess in developing performance measurements and monitoring metrics for multiple departments, multiple department teams, managers, mid-managers, and projects?
I'm sorry, I lost train of thought on that.
I can go ahead and repeat the question.
Yeah, just shorten it. Yeah.
I'll do my best. I know it's a pretty lengthy question. We must ask. Measure L also requires that for each department, the treasurer CFO shall establish performance measurements pertaining to the department's core functions with no fewer than one performance measurement based on cost, one based on quality, and one based on timelines. What formal training and experience do you possess in developing performance measurements and monitoring metrics for multiple departments, multiple department teams, managers, mid-managers, and projects?
Yeah. Thank you. I apologize again for that. Yeah, because
it is a pretty lengthy question.
It sounded so similar to the last question that I'm like, wait, what's different about it? And I see what it is: expertise. So, the last first of all, compliance is hard. Running operations and following all the rules is hard. And I the last 8 years in the military, I did that, which got me into the financial industry to do the same thing, but in the private sector. And running businesses is hard. It's not easy to comply with all the rules of the regulations, federal regulations, state regulations, maybe local regulations. But then also businesses have clients, and all the clients have different expectations. And so companies have to manage that, and it's not easy. And so although I went to these companies over the last 7 years and told them what they were doing wrong, my favorite part was helping them do it right, and thinking outside the box. And people need that. So I'm pretty sure staff at all departments want to do a great job. But sometimes you need somebody outside who has experience just building internal controls, which I've done the last 7 years, both complying and also compliance of internal controls, but also developing of internal controls for people who work for us, as well as internally, but also, an outside look to help them develop those.
Thank you, Mr. Aragon. Mr. Molina?
Yes, thank you. First of all, we don't want to assume that city department heads are intentionally not setting goals or objectives. And we also don't want to assume that either James or I know everything about every aspect of policing and fire, maintenance and streets and curbs and gutters and water. And so the first thing that you want to do, which is what I always did in putting the budget together, I bring the department heads together. And I met with the department heads and I asked them, what is it that you want your department to accomplish? How soon can it get done? And what do you think it will cost? And how does that impact the well-being of the citizens we work for? And based upon that two-way conversation, we were able to build the kind of metrics that are useful and that the department head can buy off on. Now, I think James is right. Sometimes you'll have maybe a department head who doesn't want to set any metrics on how to accomplish things or things that need to get done, in which case then you do
30 seconds.
In which case then you do have to start establishing them. But I've never really found that to be the case. When I was managing airports, water, sewer, police, fire, public works, in terms of budgetary work, all of the department heads in these other cities wanted to do a good job. And I think that's true with Oxnard as well. So I think working together to establish those metrics, but then during the year, you keep their feet to the fire and make sure that they're accomplishing those metrics within the time frame. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Molina.
And just to clarify, Mr. Molina, I apologize if I missed it. Did you say you did that when you were in finance, or did you do that now as a city treasurer?
Well, it gets a little confusing. In other cities, when I was a finance director.
Oh, I meant the experiences you mentioned right now. Was that when you were a finance director, or you did that now in your current term as city treasurer?
No, at my current term, the only job that I have right now is to be the investment manager.
Okay, my apologies if I had missed that you said that. I was just clarifying. Thank you.
In order to answer your questions, in other cities, I've been finance director and the city treasurer. And so I've been functioning as both at times.
Thank you for that. Our next question, Mr. Ebbett will take this one.
And candidates, Measure L requires that the treasurer, chief financial officer, shall select and oversee an internal auditor who shall not be an employee of the city. What would be your criteria on making this selection? Mr. Molina?
Yes. First of all, I want him to be a California State Certified Public Accountant. I want him or her to have experience in government accounting. I also want them to have experience in doing the kind of review and analysis that you get in project review. I want them to be able to show me that they have established and enforced and improved internal controls in preferably other government agencies. That, to my mind, would be the minimum requirement. Of course, I would want someone with a personality that is not gruff or dictatorial, but one that can work with people, because you get a lot more done when you can work with people. While I've been here in Oxnard, I can't tell you how many times I've had supervisors and managers give me the thumbs up as they pass me and tell me to keep at it. And people think, wow, you did all these things you claim you did.
30 seconds.
You must be a genius to find all these payments that were extra payments and whatnot. No, the reason I'm able to do that is because people trusted in my honesty, and they brought to my attention their concerns, because they're honest, good employees trying to do their best, and they want to make sure that the citizens get every bang for the dollar and not get a disadvantage of having improper use of funds. So that's how I would do it.
Mr. Molina, thank you. Mr. Aragon, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question, and I'm curious. I read the last current city's internal audit report, and it was very thorough. They found a lot of things, but they find a lot of things, and what I would be interested in is, first of all, it costs money, and so you have to kind of figure out what the city can afford and budget for, and what you can budget for then kind of drives what you can do with it. But I think the expertise is really important. I recently they're doing a request for proposal for internal audit at about $20,000. It's not going to get you a lot, for 2021, and I brought up the point that they were just asking for a certified CPA firm to do the proposal, and that's a really wide gap. A lot of CPA firms are really good at doing financials and very good at doing taxes, but not necessarily good at doing auditing. And maybe they've done some auditing on the side, but I really want to focus on a firm that is an expert in auditing. And Mr. Molina brought up a good point. He actually has brought this up to me in the past, is that, you know, government accounting rules and following those rules and having an accounting firm that does that and is expert in that. Also, if they can bring forth an expertise in internal control development and get a little bit of consulting, that'd be great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And question number 12 will be by Ms. Valencia.
In a September 1st, 2020 email sent out by the current city treasurer to the public at large, the city treasurer stated, quote, "It is a requirement of both the Sarbanes-Oxley Act and the Committee of Sponsoring Organizations that the audit committee hire the auditor, not the CEO, CFO, or city manager." The email went on to state, in part, that the establishment of an audit committee has long been regarded as a best practice for corporate governance. This is a two-part question. Would you say that your response to the previous question is in alignment with this stated best practice? If not, why do you feel that your previous response would be better suited than what is identified by Sarbanes-Oxley Act as a best practice in corporate governance?
Am I first on this one?
Mr. Aragon will go first.
Mr. Aragon.
I think both mine and Mr. Molina's comments so far have been aligned with that. COSO and Sarbanes-Oxley best practices. And actually commented on this very item during that internal control presentation, and that the audit committee, as is basically relying on the city manager staff to present to them how well the city manager staff is doing, and how well the city manager is doing. And so that's the problem that we've been emphasizing, is that there's no division of responsibilities currently, and they're not designing something with that division of responsibilities. So really need to emphasize that it's not about accusing anybody of impropriety, of accusing anybody of not having integrity. This is simple, basic governance. It's basic governance that you have a division of labor, and you have
30 seconds.
This is not as big as a publicly traded company or a lot of publicly traded, but it's still, you know, a large amount of money that is under the responsibility of a very few number of people, and there's no independent look. And that's all the city treasurer should be doing, is doing an independent look, not controlling how the money's being spent, just validating that it's being spent appropriately.
Mr. Molina.
Yeah, James and I think, are in agreement on this. You know, you look at the city wanting you to approve a tax measure, Measure E. And on the same hand, they don't want you to approve Measure L, which would only allow the treasurer to have no more or less power than to make sure that what the city told the public they're going to use those tax dollars for are in fact how they use that money. And so you do need that independence. You need someone who is not beholding to the city manager to keep his job or her job. And I'm amazed and confused at how the city seems to think that those two are opposed to one another. If the city wants that tax measure to be approved and they've identified how they want that money to be spent, then don't you and me and the citizens want an independent review to
30
say,
seconds.
you really are spending it only on the things that you said you would spend it for. Otherwise, you're giving them money and then trust but no review, no analysis to assure that they're doing what they said they do. Nobody wants that, not for a private corporation, not for a government corporation. I hope that answers your question. We're not opposed to the Treadway Commission. They are saying that you need that independence. Thank you.
Thank you both very much. So the previous two questions were related to each other. The first one is around selection of an internal auditor. And although it wasn't mentioned that I could catch, were you both saying that if Measure L passes and the city treasurer essentially becomes a CFO, that the city treasurer wouldn't select the internal auditor, it would be the audit committee as was dictated by the best practice stated in the subsequent question? Because I heard you both mention how you would select the criteria of the auditor, but we just want to see, is that what you'd prefer to do, that you do the selection as dictated by Measure L, or would it have to be an audit committee? Mr. Molina, just 30 seconds for that.
Well, first of all, when you have a government agency, you don't just throw it on the committee and say, okay, you guys decide, I'm walking out of here. You've done an analysis, you've looked at the proposals, you've gotten rid of those that don't have the minimum qualifications that you require, and then you present that to the audit committee. But they're the ones that would make the final decision. I may recommend Corporation A because they're one of the big four auditing firms. They have the staff to rotate back and forth, and that's who I would recommend. They might suggest Company B, who's also one of the big four, but for different reasons.
Thank you, sir. Your 30 seconds has expired. It was a follow-up question.
All right.
Mr. Aragon, another 30 seconds.
Sure, I appreciate you pointing out that little gap in our answer. It's 90 seconds is not a lot of time. Mr. Molina is correct, is that, the audit committee should still exist, but they're not experts, right? I mean, these are made up of city council members and maybe somebody appointed from the public, but they may not be experts. And so that's why the city treasurer would be appointing or not appointing, but like directing the audit committee of what they should be looking for and having the audit committee make the final decision. But they need some guidance, some expertise behind it. Both Mr. Molina and myself have that background.
Thank you. Okay, question 13, Mr. Ebbett, go ahead and take this one.
And candidates, this one's going to be lengthy with two questions following. Representative Duncan Hunter was investigated and later indicted for violating campaign finance laws. He stayed in office during the investigation for almost 2 years and was even reelected before he pled guilty and resigned after the election. If an appointed chief financial officer is suspected of misconduct, they can be suspended from any official acts during an investigation and inappropriate, terminated. However, if in the future we have an elected city treasurer, chief financial officer, and they engage in misconduct, what protections would be in place to ensure they don't engage in additional acts during the investigation? Also, how could they be removed short of a recall at the cost to the taxpayers or a criminal conviction if misconduct is established? Mr. Aragon, go take this first.
That's a big question. So, I don't know. I'm trying to think, refresh my memory on city treasurer and elected city treasurer and what the remedies are if somebody is under indictment. But this is democracy, and if the rules are that an elected official can only be withdrawn or removed from position because of through a recall, then that would be the methodology that would need to be done. Now, I have to imagine that if I was on the city council, I was the mayor, I was a city manager and you had that sort of situation, then you would simply file a cease and desist
30 seconds.
or to have a city treasurer's responsibilities removed and the deputy to step in. So there seems to be remedies that on the legal side, but I'm not an expert in that field. But I don't think that if the city treasurer has been indicted on something that they should continue. And if they are, then I think it would be well worth. By the way, city treasurers have to be bonded, so there's a protection against that sort of malfeasance.
Thank you. And Mr. Molina?
I was thinking hard about that. In my past experience, I had the misfortune of finding a police chief who had performed illegal acts in terms of absconding with city money. I brought that to the city manager, to the city attorney, and we brought that to the DA. And we all met with the police chief, and it was clear the evidence was there. And they decided to let him retire early, which he did. I think, you know, in the scenario that you're painting is a very serious one. And I think if the city manager and the city attorney felt, based upon information they were getting from the treasurer's staff or wherever, that the treasurer is absconding with money or properly investing funds, they would want to go to the DA and present that to the DA and then work together with the solution. You certainly don't want it dangling because that wouldn't be healthy.
30 seconds.
So I would, like James, I would end up leaving it to the attorneys. They're certainly more adept at understanding criminal law and what happens under that case. And so I would just leave it at that.
Thank you very much.
As a quick follow-up to that, to both candidates, if there is misconduct by an elected treasurer / CFO, what remedies does state law allow for us to have them removed? As was mentioned by the question, an appointed CFO can be suspended or, if appropriate, terminated. For an elected treasurer / CFO, what are our remedies? Mr. Molina, I'll give you 30 seconds for that.
Well, I did get a scholarship to go to LSU Law School, but the Army saw fit otherwise. So I'm not a lawyer, and I apologize, but I don't profess to understand criminal law. All I understand is the very narrow perspective of government accounting and financial rules. I would leave that up to the city attorney and the district attorney to identify. I mean, they've, I suppose, had experience in other cities and in other counties where that may be the case. I don't want to make a statement that ends up being
30 seconds has expired, sir. Thank you, Mr. Molina. Mr. Aragon, 30 more seconds.
Yeah, I mean, that's, I agree. It's a matter of fact, I'm looking while Mr. Molina was answering, I'm looking at a little cheat sheet on the state law. And there's nothing in there that talks about what to do in that circumstance. It's criminal law, a DA, attorneys would have to deal with that sort of situation. I think this question gets at whether or not there should be an elected person responsible for the money. And well, there's lots of elected people responsible for lots of money all throughout government. And there has been a problem. Then the remedies there.
Thank you, sir. 30 seconds has expired. Thank you both for that clarifying question. And I am not a lawyer also. All I know is the bare basics of to remove an elected official, we need to either recall them, as Mr. Aragon had mentioned, or not elect them at the next election cycle for that position. But maybe we'll get more experts in the comments in the subsequent viewings of this. Thank you. I'm going to have Ms. Valencia go ahead and move us on to question number 15.
Thanks, Gabe. Let me just go ahead and get my notes here since we have a lot of them. Okay, question number 15. How can a system with one elected individual in control of all of the city's finances provide more oversight than a professional city manager, professional finance director, and a 7-member elected city council?
And I believe we're starting with Mr. Aragon on this. My apologies on that.
No worries. I was waiting for the green light. Well, it's not better, and it's certainly not doing it alone. All three bodies, the operations staff, which is led by the city manager, the strategic staff, which is the city council that directs expenditures and priorities of the city, and then the city treasurer, who's providing overwatch of what's happening. None of them should be able to operate independently. Whatever the city treasurer is doing, the city manager and the city council should be well aware, and vice versa. Whatever the city manager, there should be a working relationship, and not everybody working on their own. So it's not about the city treasurer being better than the city manager at doing it. The purpose is having, again, we've said it before, those division of responsibilities where somebody is spending the money, somebody who's just directing the spending of money, and someone is overseeing the spending of money.
30 seconds.
If they work in partnership, then you can have a lot of solutions to existing problems, and you can have great working relationships. And it's not about being better. I mean, I don't think I can do a better job than city manager at managing money, but that would be my responsibility, is overseeing the management of the money and the expenditure, and he would be running and spending the money. That's it.
So the question is, how does establishing the city treasurer and finance director improve on having the city manager and the city council handle the finances? Would you repeat the question for me again, please?
Alejandra?
Yes, absolutely. How can a system with one elected individual in control of all of the city's finances provide more oversight than a professional city manager, professional finance director, and a 7-member elected city council?
Well, I think you have to look at the fact that the city council hires the city manager, and between the two of them, they'll hire the finance director, the police chief, the fire chief, public works director. But does that mean that the city mayor has to have the knowledge of a professional engineer and certified policeman and a fireman in order to be able to do that? What we're electing people for is to represent us, the individual who elected them to do their job. The city treasurer, hopefully, would be someone, as James mentioned, and as our past experience in this city shows, that has some financial background. But with that, then they're not doing the daily work. They're not counting the cash. They're not receiving the cash. They're not issuing the utility bills. They're not processing the bills. But they're the person who's responsible for making sure that people who do that are doing it in a manner that's consistent with good accounting
30 seconds.
government policies. So the city manager, quite frankly, may or may not be good at aiming a rifle. Does that mean he can't hire a police chief? He may know nothing about accounting. Does that mean he can't hire? No, and same with the treasurer. That doesn't mean that I can't hire a good person to be working in the finance department or in the treasurer's department, but we want someone who represents us and make sure that our will is adhered to at the government level, an independent review of the finances. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Molina.
Thank you both very much. We really appreciate you going through that. Sometimes lengthy. We did take language directly from the ballots. The questions came in, and then we saw what portions they related to. So we wanted to refer to the ballot language itself, so that the public could see what we were referring to. Some of those might have been tough questions. I hope that they were Good and thoughtful questions, though, for both of you. So now we have one final question that Mr. Ebbett will take. It's question number 16 before we go to closing statements.
Candidates, what are your goals to improve the financial stability of the city of Oxnard? Mr. Molina?
Well, first of all, get Measure L passed so you can demand that we provide to you monthly financial reports. Right now, you're operating in the blind. Council is operating in the blind. I asked you to ask the council, what's the total revenue you've received in the general funds year to date? They haven't got a clue. But they should. They should be able to say, you know, I don't remember, but here's a piece of paper. Oh, there it is. It tells me right there, last month, this is how much we got. This is how much we spent. So we need to be able to have financial reporting that is accurate and correct, consistent with government accounting procedures and practices, so that and produce those reports on a monthly basis. Until we do that, we're operating in the blind, and there's no way that we can improve our financial condition. We may find, for example, that 50 of the 176 funds don't need to be separate funds. We can gather that cash, put it back into the general fund, and guess what? We may be in good shape. We don't know that yet. I've offered to help the finance staff to go through each one of those funds to make sure that they are legally required. And when not, let's accumulate the cash and put it in the general fund. That has not been accepted as of late, but God willing, Measure L passes, and if I'm in office, that's one of the first things I'm going to do. And you may find that, wow, there's an entirely different picture of the finances of the city than we've been told. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Aragon?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think in the end, what the treasurer can do with Measure L passing is provide the transparency of what's going on. But if the residents of the city of Oxnard want good financial stability, then they're going to need to elect city councilmen who are going to vote in that manner. And right now, we are spending 100% of what we're taking in. They want to build a homeless shelter downtown. That's all fine and good. That homeless shelter is going to need a roof someday. Someday that roof's going to leak. They are not going to create any fund to replace that roof. There's no capital improvement plan. There's a plan, but there's no capital improvement financial plan. So that every time a fire station needs a new roof, it's an emergency. There's no cash. And they have to cut funding over there because
30 seconds.
They're not financially responsible. They want to do everything that everybody wants. So they want to appease everybody who has a good idea about how to make the city better. But in the end, the residents have to decide that they want to be responsible with their taxpayer money, and they want the city council to be responsible. And then we can get that level of responsibility. Right now, I'm afraid if Measure L passes and the city treasurer is able to oversee, you're only going to get the truth. You're not going to get what you want.
Thank both of you for your answering these questions tonight. Gabe?
Thank you very much. We'll now move into our closing statements. You'll each get 3 minutes, and this time we will start with Mr. Molina, and then we will end with Mr. Aragon. Mr. Molina?
Yes, thank you very much. 4 years ago, you elected me as a reformer to root out waste, mismanagement, and corruption. Fortunately, my background as a CPA with an MBA and inside knowledge of the former Oxnard Finance Director prepared me for this task. I have encountered resistance in doing my job, but because of your support, we were able to stop payments on long-term expired contracts, prevented payments lacking budgetary authority, blocked duplicate payments to vendors. We fought against cronyism and sweetheart deals. We recovered unauthorized loans, closely monitored cash receipts, successfully lobbied for an independent auditor and whistleblower, and we earned the city of Oxnard the highest award the state offers for the investment policy that we put together, along with my treasurer staff, and they're excellent people. During my term in office, we also prudently invested the city's money in safe investments, earning taxpayers over $13 million. Hopefully we'll exceed $15 million by the time the election's over. Oxnard City Hall actively places roadblocks in my path, however, for the reform. And that's why I need your help more than ever. Please vote yes on Measure L, the Oxnard Financial Transparency and Accountability Act, as a check against the city manager so that I can make all city expenditures public, create public performance metrics for all city departments. As always, I remain accessible. My email address is oxnardemail@gmail.com. I would be honored if you would vote again for me, Phillip Molina, for your treasurer. Thank you very much. And may I say good luck, James, on your CPA. I wish you the best.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Mr. Aragon, 3 minutes.
Great. Yeah, this has been fun, and I do think the questions were challenging, and answering them in 90 seconds was even more challenging. I would have changed it though, because I do think it kind of demonstrates what you have in front of you. And I think me and Mr. Molina did a pretty good job answering it. I think I tripped up a couple times, but overall, it's been a good experience and I enjoyed it. And I hope everybody who's watching it now or watching it in the future enjoy it and think about what we've been saying. I sincerely prefer that Measure L get passed than I win the election. I think it's a real great opportunity for the city to really great. And I think it's important. There's other measures out there too that'll make the city better. I think Measure L is one of the most important ones. I spent 20 years in the military, and I loved every minute of it. But I was ready for a change. I'm so proud that I was able to successfully transfer to the Air Force, to the banking industry as a risk compliance and audit professional. I've had a really good time fixing issues, identifying issues, getting them fixed, and making whatever business I've touched better. And I really love to do the same for the city of Oxnard. Even if I don't win, I've already thrown it out there at city council meetings. If they ever have a problem and they want to learn how to get efficient, I don't mind volunteering, free of charge, no problem. I really enjoy solving problems. And I think the city of Oxnard has problems, but I think there are solutions. And I just think that council and city manager just need to be open to the idea that other people have ideas. And I think great things can happen. I want to shout out to the city manager. My impression to him is that he really wants to do a good job. And I think he really is excited about the opportunity of turning the city of Oxnard around. But I do think that he doesn't recognize the value that somebody like Mr. Molina or myself can bring to the table. And I just hope that he opens his eyes to that, because without people who want to do good for the city's going to have a hard time doing good. So finally, if you do vote for myself, I would really appreciate it. I'll be excited to jump in and get things done. But if Mr. Molina wins the election, my hat's off to him. I think he really does care about the city and about doing things right. And I hope you also vote for Measure L to support either him or myself in making that happen. So thanks for your time this evening. And I'm so glad it's going to be cold next week.
Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you both very much. I think I might have been on mute when I said 30 seconds there. My apologies on that. So I want to thank both of you for your time this evening and dedicating it to inform the public about your experience and your thoughts and ideas for moving forward with the city treasurer's role. And so at this point in the evening, if we were in person, I'd ask everybody, please give our candidates a round of applause for their efforts here tonight. And again, I want to thank you both for your time this evening. I really enjoyed it, and it's great to hear from both of you, and I wish you both luck in the election. With that being said, this concludes our series of our INCO elections forums. One last question I have for our two candidates. We have a number of questions from the public that came in during the Zoom meeting. And would you be willing to have us take these, send them to you, and you would respond and send them back to us, or we can post them for the public to review?
That'd be fine.
Great. Thank you both very much. I want to thank everybody who tuned in this evening and for our other evenings. I want to thank all of our candidates, all of the proponents who came on the evening for the measures, for all of their help in putting this together. We couldn't have done it without the candidates participating, so absolutely thank you so much for that. But most of all, I want to thank our community volunteers who volunteered their time to put all of these 4 evenings together. And we had a number of hours where we worked on everything from developing the dates to the questions to what order people were going to go in. I mean, there was a lot of work put into it that people don't see, and I hope that the public out there can truly appreciate it. So I want to thank first Ms. Alejandra Valencia, who was with us tonight and helped ask questions, and Mr. Dave Ebbett, who is also asking questions this evening, Mr. Alex Ray Rivera, Ms. Diana Velsi, Mr. Manuel Herrera, and Ms. Yolanda Solorio. Those 6 were part of our community planning group. Again, all volunteers who helped put this all together. I am so very grateful to them. We couldn't have done this without all of your help. And again, thank you all very much. I hope you have a wonderful evening, and remember to vote in our election. Mail-in ballots will be coming soon if they're not here already. Thank you very much. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you and good night.